You have to know how to hold those things. Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the Vashon Island Unitarian Fellowship. My name is Mary Van Gemmer, and I will be your service leader for today. As a reminder, this service is being recorded and will be posted on our website. While some of us are at Lewis Hall in person, other members of our beloved community are not able to fully, are online. We live stream for those on Zoom. Thank you. While we are not able to participate fully, if you are, we hold you in our hearts as part of our beloved community. Recording will be stopped for joys and concerns. We are a lay-led community strengthened and enriched by weaving together the volunteer contributions of members and friends. Our community is supported and guided by our minister, Victoria Poling. If you are new, we are especially glad you are here. Please participate as you feel comfortable in our Sunday service. Human connection and relations are important parts of our community. We invite you to stay for conversation following the end of the service. We are clear in our desire to acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Squamish Coast Salish Native people. The Puyallup and Muckleshoot people have lived on and stewarded these lands for the last 10 to 12,000 years since humans made their way here from Asia, and they continue to do so today. We commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories as well as promoting social justice actions for and with the indigenous people of this land and beyond. As we settle in, we acknowledge that our congregation is committed to individual freedom of belief, welcomes diversity, seeks to promote a sense of community, and fosters religion which enriches the spirit. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you belong here and are welcome. Now, if you would please repeat after me. It is good.
It is good.
It is good to be.
It is good to be.
It is good to be here together.
It is good to be here together.
We are honored to welcome Reverend Bruce Bodie today. Bruce A. Bodie is a minister emeritus at the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Port Townsend, Washington, from which he retired in 2018 as the senior minister after serving the congregation for 14 years. Before coming to Port Townsend, Reverend Bodie was the interim minister of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston, Texas, and the Hope Unitarian Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Prior to that, he served for 22 years as an associate minister at the Fountain Street Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a large, independent, religiously liberal congregation. Reverend Bodie, would you please light our chalice and share more about today's service?
Thank you, Mary, for your introduction, and I will light the chalice in just a moment. But first, I want to greet all of you who are present here in the sanctuary, and also to those of you who may be tuning in virtually. This is the first time that my wife, Flossie, and I have been on Vashon Island, even though, we've been in Port Townsend for many years. But I do have some connections to some persons from Vashon Island. When I was a minister at the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Port Townsend, on several occasions I worked with Michael Mead, who, as many of you know, is a longtime resident of Vashon Island. And over the years, Michael gave a number of workshops in our sanctuary, also provided some of the Sunday services or the sermons on those occasions. And I need to say sermons because actually, when I was there, we had two services which were supposed to be identical. Well, Michael, it seems, is congenitally unable to do the same thing twice. And so something would happen in the first service and off he would go, and that would now become the basis for his message in the second service. It was a lot of fun. And I tell you, Michael is an absolutely amazing talent. Also, some of you longtime members may remember John and Carol Collins, who were members of this congregation. They moved to Port Townsend around the same time I did in 2004 and are there still as prominent members of that congregation. Finally, as some of you may be aware, your minister, Victoria Poling, is someone who is a member of the congregation that I served in Port Townsend. She and her parents both were there and were prominent members. Unfortunately, her dear father, Mitch Poling, died a few years ago, and Victoria was very, very close to her. Well, I knew Victoria first, and this may be a surprise to some of you, but I knew her first as an outstanding violinist. Oh, see, I hope I'm not giving that away, but we would get her as many times as we could to play at the services, and often, particularly, I love to hear her on Christmas Eve services, just fill the sanctuary. And then one time, she was a summer speaker once, and then later, she and I combined on a service. This was in around the Christmas season of 2015. And afterwards, people came up to her, have you considered being a minister? This was her prompt to begin studying for the ministry, which she finally completed and then was ordained at her home church in Port Townsend just this past June. I was present there with a robe on for that. So you are the first congregation to be the recipient of her remarkable talents and inspirations. 2 weeks ago, Victoria led the service here on the Soul Matters theme of the month, which is heritage. I've been in contact with Victoria about that, and that's the theme that I will be working with you this morning, the theme of heritage. And I've chosen the words for the chalice lighting this morning with that theme of heritage in mind. And these are words that are freely adapted from the 6th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy in the Hebrew scriptures, these words: we are ever bound in community. We build on foundations we did not lay. We warm ourselves at fires we did not light. We sit in the shade of trees that we did not plant. We drink from wells we did not dig. We profit from persons we did not know. We light this chalice in thanksgiving for those who have passed their light to us. And so now, beginning to explore this theme of heritage with you, let me, in a lead up to a responsive reading that we will have, bring forward what for me is an important distinction between the broader category of being religious as a species and the narrower category of belonging to a religious organization as individuals within that species. As I see it, our heritage in terms of biological evolution is that we are a religious species on this planet, perhaps the religious species, and that we are the ones who are compelled to ask what I call the religious questions. Released from sheer instinct, through the evolutionary development of the neocortex of our brains, we humans are those creatures who are forced to question the meaning of our lives in the face of the knowledge of our death. We humans are those creatures who, looking up at the stars in both wonder and worry, are compelled to ask, who are we in this vast universe in which we find ourselves, and what sense, if any, are we to make of it? What meaning and purpose, if any, may be ascribed to our lives, and how should we live our lives? What ought we to be about? To what or to whom should we ultimately devote ourselves? And what is worthy of our devotion? To what or whom should we give our allegiance? And what is worthy of our allegiance? Now, these, to me, are some of the quintessential religious questions that describe the religious enterprise, and these are questions and concerns that we as a species have to deal with. So that is my sense of heritage from the biological evolutionary perspective. Then we come to another part of our human heritage, namely religious organizations, which come into being, I think, in order to attend to these religious questions, whether or not you like how they do it. But these are the questions of ultimate meaning, value, devotion, commitment, and relatedness. And organized religion, of course, does this in many, many ways with a great variety of answers. Which brings me finally, in case you were wondering, to our responsive reading, which you will find there on your yellow papers. These are written by the Reverend W. Waldemar W. Argo. I looked it up. That's actually his name. He has 3 W's in it, and this was prior to the World Wide Web. So in case you haven't done, this is a call and response. I have the minister part here, all right? So would you join with me? Ancient as the home is the temple. Ancient as the workbench is the altar.
Ancient as the sword is the sacrificial fire. Ancient as the soldier is the priest.
Older than written language is spoken prayer. Older than painting is the thought of the nameless one.
Religion is the first and last, the universal language of the human heart.
Differing words describe the outward appearance of things. Diverse symbols represent that which stands beyond and within.
Yet every person's hunger is the same, and heart communicates with heart.
Ever the vision leads on, with many gods or with one, with a holy land washed by ocean waters or a holy land within the heart.
In temperament we differ, yet we are dedicated to the one august destiny. Creeds divide us, but we share a common quest.
Because we are human, we shall ever build our altars. Because each has a holy yearning, we offer everywhere our prayers and anthems.
For an eternal rarity abides beneath universities. We are children of one great love, united in our one eternal family.
Thank you. Our first hymn is number 360 in your gray-colored hymnals, singing the living tradition. Here we are gathered, and you are invited to stand in body and or spirit to join in singing. 360, here we are gathered. In introducing the responsive reading, I made a distinction between belonging to a religious species and belonging to a religious organization. And so now I turn to heritage in terms of this particular religious organization, the Vashon Island Unitarian Universalists, which is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. The most prominent public theologian within our association within the last generation or so has been the Reverend Dr. Forrest Church. He served as the senior minister for the All Souls Unitarian Church of New York City for almost 30 years until his untimely death from esophageal cancer in 2009 at the age of 61. This morning, what I want to do with you is to introduce you to two metaphors from Forrest Church's very last book. It's titled The Cathedral of the World, a Universalist Theology. It was one of 25 books that he authored or co-authored. And in the introduction to this final book, Forrest presents to us what to me is an absolutely stunning illustration of universalism, both in terms of its value and importance in our modern world, and also the challenge and difficulty of embracing and living out of a universalist perspective. Now, Forrest doesn't give a name to this metaphor that I'm going to read, but I'll name it Universalism and the Luminous Light of the Moon's Path Over Water. Universalism and the luminous light of the moon's path over water. You'll see what I mean. Okay, here's the illustration. So Forrest writes, this is in the introduction to this book, Universalism speaks with particular eloquence to the challenge of our times. Today, our neighbors live not only across the street, but across the world as well. During an age where we share a global economy and communication systems, in addition to nuclear and environmental threats, universalism addresses our era's most dangerous dysfunction, theological parochialism. Every denomination, including my own Unitarian Universalist Association, can fall prey to such nearsightedness. To fulfill its promise, modern universalism must witness against fundamentalists on the left as well as those on the right. By definition, universalism is not the property of any discrete religious body, including those that include it in their names. To illustrate this point, which pivots at the center of my theology, let me take you on a brief journey. We shall walk together to the water's edge and follow the light of the moon, wherever it may lead. We are standing on the shoreline of a mountain lake, moonlight lapping against our boot tips, mesmerized by the golden carpet laid out over the water as if lowered from the heavens to meet us at the very place where we stand. Before us, along the moon's glorious trail, we can see all the way to the lake's rocky bottom. Above the sunken branches, we watch the water dance and sparkle, a rack of moonbeams on each ripple's crest. Across the lake, where the moon is rising, our path turns to liquid gold. Standing on the shore some distance to our right, a man contemplates the same view, yet appears shrouded in darkness. To our left stands a woman, her silhouette all but obscured by the blackness that envelops her. Pondering these two apparently benighted people, we wonder to ourselves, what can they possibly be thinking? Encompassed by darkness, the moon before them flat and lifeless. If only they would join us at the foot of the moon's luminous path, they too could bathe in celestial light. Henry David Thoreau once chastised the Florentine artist and adventurer Benvenuto Cellini for mistaking the aura he saw surrounding his shadow on a dew-drenched day as a special sign of divine recognition. In the moonlight, we experience a like illusion, as do the man and woman to our right and left, who share our vision, though we perceive them to be in darkness. Judging only by what they see, they too may feel themselves uniquely illumined. To their eyes, it is we who appear to languish in darkness. Expressive of both the wonder and danger of religion on the one hand, the moon's golden light extends a path across the lake to the feet of everyone who stands under the spell of its supernal glow. On the other, given that each onlooker sees only his or her own golden pathway, all others standing in apparent darkness, we are left with the impression that we walk the one true path alone, whereas those who fail to join us are lost. Here, nature can serve as our theological tutor. She reminds us that in almost every way that matters, we and our most distant neighbor, sprung from a single source and sharing the same destiny, are one. This revelation encapsulates the essence of Universalist theology. To perceive things as they are, not merely as they appear, we must view them with parallax vision. That is, we must imagine seeing things through others' eyes as well as through our own. That's the end of our reading. I'd like to invite you now into a minute or two of silence, encouraging you to reflect on what it means to you to attempt to see things through the eyes and life experience of others. I will ring the chime to end our period of silence. I'm dividing the sermon portion of this service into two parts. In the first part, I'm going to introduce Dr. Church's primary metaphor related to this universalist theological perspective. And then in the second part, after a brief musical interlude, I'm going to speak about the 5 principles that Forest Church finds embodied in this metaphor. I'm going to begin, however, with just a bit of Universalist history in terms of heritage. Historically, Universalism is the theological doctrine within the Christian religion of universal salvation. This notion, which was declared a heresy in 544, goes back to the 3rd century and to the church father Origen, who in 225 wrote a book titled On First Principles, and in that he advocated a belief in universal salvation. Much later, this belief in universal salvation became the distinguishing and founding doctrine of a religiously liberal Christian denomination in the United States that bore the Universalist name. It was first called the Universalist General Convention. The primary early theologian of the Universalist Church was an impressive and self-educated man with a delightful name of Hosea Ballou. He lived from 1771 to 1852, and he argued that there must be universal salvation, for God is love, pure, unadulterated, overwhelming, and everlasting love. And how could such a God of love condemn the larger portion of humanity to an eternity of punishment and torment in the fires of hell? So Ballou taught that it was not God who needed to be reconciled to humans. God was not so easily provoked by human error, nor so easily appeased by blood sacrifice. Rather, it was humans who needed to be reconciled to this God of love. And indeed, this supremely loving God, this infinite and all-powerful, embracing, loving reality would not and could not be thwarted by human frailty. This loving God would find some way to get everyone in through the gate. So argued Hosea Ballou, one doesn't have to first be cleansed in order to be saved by God. Rather, salvation is grounded in God's nature, which is love, as in the love of a father for his child. And in his 81st and final year of his life, Hosea Ballou, he was making his final address to the General Assembly of the Universalists. This was in 1851, just a few months before his death. He gave what to me is just a beautiful, striking example of this divine Father love. He said to the convention, "Your child has fallen into the mire, and its body and its garments are defiled. You cleanse it and array it in clean robes. The question is, do you love your child because you have washed it? Or did you wash your child because you loved it?" I think the answer is you washed your child because you loved it. Moving on, in 1942, the Universalist General Convention renamed themselves the Universalist Church of America. And then in 1961, the Universalist Church in America consolidated with the American Unitarian Association to form the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. The position of theological universalism in our time and in our Unitarian Universalist Association, however, has undergone a major transformation. No longer does universalism typically refer to the specific doctrinal concern of universal salvation under the Christian banner. Rather, universalism has broken out of its Christian heritage to embrace all religions, not holding one to be preeminent over the others. And an eloquent spokesperson for this new universalism is, as I mentioned, the minister and author, Dr. Forrest Church, who somewhere in the 1980s came up with a metaphor for this universalist position that he called the Cathedral of the world. He worked on and with that metaphor over the years, and then just a few months before he died, this was in 2009, as I said, he managed to finish the book which I spoke of, read from earlier, The Cathedral of the World, a Universalist Theology. And so now I'm going to, in the first part of this sermon, I'm going to finish this first part by reading this metaphor to you. And I'm going to be reading from an article where I first came across it. It was an article in the UU World, and it was from the November-December 2001 issue. He had just given a major address to the General Assembly in Cleveland, Ohio, and then so this article followed. But I also find what I'm going to read for you in his books, A Chosen Faith, Lifecraft, Bringing God Home, as well as The Cathedral of the World. So here's what he writes in this extended metaphor. Imagine the world as a vast cathedral. The cathedral is as ancient as humankind. Its cornerstone is the first altar, marked with the tincture of blood and blessed by tears. Search for a lifetime, which is all we are given, and we shall never know its limits, visit all its transepts, worship at its myriad shrines, nor span its celestial ceiling with our gaze. The builders have labored in this cathedral from time immemorial. Daily, work begins that shall not be finished in the lifetime of the architects who planned it, the patrons who paid for it, the builders who construct it, or the expectant worshipers. Nevertheless, throughout human history, one generation after another has labored lovingly, sometimes fearfully, crafting memorials and consecrating shrines. Untold numbers of these collect in dust in long undisturbed. Untold numbers of these collect dust in long undisturbed chambers. Others, cast centuries or millennia ago from their respected places, lie shattered on the cathedral floor. Not a moment passes without the dreams of long dead dreamers being outstripped, crushed, or abandoned, giving way to new visions, each immortal in reach, ephemeral in grasp. Above all else, contemplate the windows. In the Cathedral of the World, there are windows beyond number, some long forgotten, covered with many patinas of dust, others revered by millions, the most sacred of shrines. Each in its own way is beautiful. Some are abstract, others representational, some dark and meditative, others bright and dazzling. Each tells a story about the creation of the world, the meaning of history, the purpose of life, the nature of humankind, the mystery of death. The windows of the cathedral are where the light shines through. As with all extended metaphors, this one is imperfect. The light of God or truth or being itself shines not only upon us, but out from within us as well. Together with the windows, we are part of the cathedral, not apart from it. Together, we comprise an interdependent web of being. The cathedral is constructed out of star stuff, and so are we. We are that part or known part of creation that contemplates itself. Because the cathedral is so vast, our life so short, and our vision so dim, we are able to contemplate only a tiny part of the whole creation. We can explore but a handful of its many chambers. Our allotted span permits us to reflect on the play of darkness and light through remarkably few of its myriad windows. Yet, since the whole is contained in each of its parts, as we ponder and act on insights derived from even a single reflection, we may experience self-illumination. We may also discover or invent meanings that invest both the creation and our lives with coherence and meaning. Forrest continues, a 21st century theology based on the concept of one light, Unitarianism, and many windows, Universalism, offers to its adherents both breadth and focus. Honoring many different religious approaches, it excludes only the truth claims of absolutists. This is because fundamentalists, whether on the right or left, claim that the light shines through their window only. Skeptics draw the opposite conclusion. Seeing the bewildering variety of windows and observing the folly of the worshipers, they conclude that there is no light. But the windows are not the light, only where the light shines through. One cautionary note, he says, universalism itself can be perverted in two ways. One is to elevate one truth into a universal truth. My church is the one true church. The other is to reduce distinctive truths to a lowest common denominator. All religion is merely a set of variations upon the golden rule. The universalism I embrace, says Forest Church, does neither. It holds that the same light shines through all our windows, but that each window is different. The windows modify the light, refracting it in various patterns that suggest discrete meanings. Just as one cannot believe in everything, to find meaningful expression, universalism must be modified or refracted through the glass of individual and group experience, which by definition would be less than universal. One, he says, a person can be a Buddhist universalist, a pagan universalist, a humanist universalist, a Jewish universalist, a Christian universalist. On the other hand, one cannot in any meaningful sense be a universalist. Neither can one be a universalist Christian, where the modifier of one's faith becomes when the modifier of one's faith becomes its nominative, primary allegiance is relegated to but one part of the whole that encompasses it. I hope you got that last sentence. It was the most, but we're going to have a little musical break, aren't we? Great. Okay. So we're going to take a short musical break while you reflect on that Cathedral of the World metaphor. Thank you, Ann. Forest Church finds 5 fundamental principles of a modern universalist theological perspective in that Cathedral of the World metaphor that I just read. Let me list them quickly, and then I'll give brief comments on each of them. So first, there is one power, one truth, one God, one light. 2, this light shines through every window in the cathedral. 3, No one can perceive the light directly, the mystery being forever veiled. 4, yet on the cathedral floor and in the eyes of each beholder, refracted and reflected through different windows in differing ways, the light plays in patterns that suggest meanings, challenging us to interpret and live by these meanings as best we can. And then 5, each window illuminates truth, T, uppercase T, in a unique way, leading to various truths, lowercase t, and these in differing measures according to the insight, receptivity, and behavior of the beholder. Now, a little commentary. So first, there is one power, one truth, one God, one light. This is really theological Unitarianism, which Universalist theology assumes and incorporates. This perspective holds that ultimately being is one. Being, reality, is of one piece, it's one cloth, and even though that cloth may have outer and undersides as we view it, it is still one cloth. This perspective holds that we all come from the same source. There is but a single power, creative power and source that infuses all there is, not a light God and a dark God, not a Yahweh and a Satan, but we are all born of the same mother, and therefore ultimately we belong each to the other. And this perspective also holds that our unity is ultimately deeper than our separation. It holds that boundaries, separations, and divisions between us, though real enough in their own way, are ultimately secondary and therefore illusory, even though at times they may feel to us to be impenetrable. Please note the current conflict going on in the Middle East. Secondly, this light that shines upon this cathedral of the world shines through every window in the cathedral. And this is theological universalism. And so now here, the emphasis is not on the unity of the light, but on the particularity of the light in each part of the creation. Every particle of being is from the same source and reveals something of that source. So nothing, therefore, is without value. Each thing is precious in its own way. Our Universalist forebears, like Hosea Ballou, proclaimed that the Creator does not turn its back on any person or damn any souls. Hell, if there is a hell, is unpopulated, for a God of love will surely find a way to redeem and save all. If you want a quick shorthand way of explaining to others what modern Unitarian Universalism about, you can simply say, one light, that's Unitarianism, many windows, Universalism. One source, Unitarianism, many manifestations, Universalism. One truth, uppercase T, Unitarianism, many truths, lowercase t, Universalism. One God, uppercase G, Unitarianism. Many gods and goddesses, lowercase g, is Universalism, many faiths. Okay, so that's a shorthand way. There you go. Incidentally, I'm going to make a print version of this if so you can follow some of these things. All right, so I'll send it. I don't know. I'll send it to whoever, but I'll send it to Catherine. Where's Catherine? Yes. Okay. So 3. A third fundamental principle of Universalist theology, illustrated in the Cathedral of the World metaphor, is the principle that no one can perceive the light directly. The mystery is forever veiled. So this is the idea that the light is always a mediated light. the light shines through the windows of colored glass, or, to change the analogy, the light is colored by the structures through which we apprehend it. And let me give you an example of the impossibility of grasping the whole of the light directly. And this is an analogy related to physical and visible light. So visible light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which are the electromagnetic waves that flood our Earth. The longest waves, radio waves, are at one end of the spectrum, and the shortest waves, gamma waves, are at the other end of the spectrum. And then near the middle is a band of waves we call the visible waves. So these are the waves for which we humans have evolved receptors known as eyes, all right? Other creatures have also evolved receptors for these visible waves, in some cases quite different than our own. These eyes of ours, these living instruments making use of the visible band of waves, are a form of sensibility through which and by which we grasp our universe. They are open to reality, they open reality to us in certain ways, but only in certain ways. So imagine that, for example, we humans had evolved eyes adapted to X-rays. With such X-ray eyes, how very different our take on reality would be, and how very different our judgments and sense of beauty might be. And yet, it would be an equally true and valid perspective. So, our vision, our grasp of God or reality or light or ultimate reality, you pick your term, is always mediated by the receiving mechanisms of our particular being. Our grasp, therefore, is always limited, always partial. And religion, at its best, has taught this. Some of you may know the opening line from the Tao Te Ching, the very opening verse. The Tao, and that's a lowercase t, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, uppercase T. The name, lowercase n, the name that can be named is not the eternal name, and that is with a uppercase N. And now to the fourth fundamental principle of a universalist theology in this cathedral of the world metaphor. It reads as follows: Yet, on the cathedral floor and in the eyes of each beholder, refracted and reflected through different windows in differing ways, the light plays in patterns that suggest meanings, challenging us to interpret and live by these meanings as best we can. The point here is that even though we can't apprehend or comprehend the light directly or fully, we are still apprehending and comprehending it. It is light, and it is truth that we are apprehending and comprehending. And it is enough to see by, it's enough to live by, it's just that it's not the absolute or final expression of the light. Sometimes, as Forrest Church suggests, we may be tempted to conclude that because the truth cannot be grasped directly or completely, there is no truth. Or because there are many different expressions of truth, there is no truth. But that's not a necessary or useful conclusion to be made. Our physical eyes do rightly perceive aspects of reality, just as other mechanisms that we have invented, like X-ray machines, also perceive aspects of reality from other perspectives. So too, we do apprehend the truth, just not the whole or final or absolute or ultimate truth. And Forrest also suggests that the best way to deepen our understanding of the light and the best way to deepen our acquaintance with life is to stick, if we can, to our own window and not try to run around and look through as many windows as we possibly might be able to do. Even though we may draw inspiration and learn many things about our own perspective through acquaintance and in conversation with other perspectives, Forrest does not advocate what he calls a smorgasbord approach. He refers to this smorgasbord approach as reductionistic universalism, a little too much of everything, leaving us with a stomach ache and a confused palate, all right? And so he suggests, and I agree with him, stick with your own window, your own tradition, your own language if you can. Don't go jumping around all over the place trying to look through as many windows as you possibly can. First of all, it's not possible to become acquainted with very many other traditions. And secondly, it's difficult to go very deep with any particular one if you're constantly shifting and uprooting yourself. The universal, I think, is known in and through the particular. So get to know your place. There's plenty of light to be found there. Finally, 5. Principle number 4 has to do with our given window, our given place and view of reality. And so that we come finally to the 5th principle of Universalist theology that's in this metaphor, a principle that has to do with other perspectives, namely, each window illuminates truth, capital T, in a unique way, leading to various truths, lowercase t, and these in differing measure according to the insight, receptivity, and behavior of the beholder. This final point is at the heart of the Universalist message, and namely the belief that truth is plural, not singular, that the light shines through all the windows, and that it is indeed light that is shining through the other windows, though it may seem obscure or opaque to us, as in that metaphor I gave you earlier from the earlier reading about the moon's luminous path of light over the water. It's so hard sometimes to imagine that a person who is looking through a differently shaped and differently colored window than our own is connected to the light. It's so hard sometimes to imagine that a person who has a very different take on things than our own also has a handle on truth. But this is the particular task of our age, if we will not destroy ourselves. That is, to become aware in the depth of our souls that truth is plural, not singular. So, at the same time that we are deepening our own understanding of the truth of the light coming through our own window, we must also become aware that others can be deepening their truth by looking through their windows. And he has one final point here, namely that there is one truth claim that has no place in a universalist theology, namely the truth claim of the absolutists, who would declare that they have a corner on the truth, the final revelation, and even in some cases the right or obligation to smash the windows of others. And so Forrest Church speaks of one cardinal rule in the Cathedral of the World metaphor, namely, no stone throwing through other people's windows. Is that enough for this morning? That's my first time with you, so, you know. But let's conclude this portion of the service then with, and this message, with a hymn. It's a beautiful expression of the universalism, I think. It's number 159 in your hymnals, the Finlandia tune, This Is My Song. It's also, I think, 318 in the hymnals, We Would Be One, but the particular one I want is This Is My Song, and again, you are invited to stand in body or spirit to join in singing.
skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
I just love that song. Whew. Well, now we are going to pause the recording as we prepare for joys and concerns. Here, but there is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding me. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We will now resume recording as we finish the service. As members and friends of Vashon Island Unitarian Universalists, we commit to supporting our fellowship. Financial resources help us pay speakers and staff, support our social justice programs, and maintain our building. Please support VIUU with your pledges and offerings so that we can continue to be a vital community. Our fellowship engages beyond our walls for peace, social, and economic justice, freedom of belief, and protection of our planet and its inhabitants. Once a month, we contribute the financial offering to a community organization that aligns with our values. This week's offering supports our beloved Vashon Island Unitarian Universalist community. I invite our greeters to come up and pass around the offering basket. As we pass the basket, please join in singing, "We give thanks." We give thanks. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for the times we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and far away, for the times we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Reverend Bodie?
Speaking of giving thanks, I want to thank those who have participated in assisting in preparing and this service. Catherine Sullivan was the coordinator who I was in touch with on several occasions. Mary and I, both of Dutch heritage, thank you for being the service leader. And thank you for your playing this morning, much appreciated. And Spencer, our technician. All right. And I want to thank, you're not disturbed, what? Oh, all right. And I also, we had wonderful hospitality last evening, thanks to Melvin and Margaret Mackey. So thank you very much. So, our closing words of benediction are those of the Reverend Frederick Gillis. May the love that overcomes all differences, that heals all wounds, that puts to flight all fears, that reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. And now we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our formal service is now over. I'd like to give a special thanks to, many more thanks here, Reverend Bruce Bodie for his message, to Anne for the lovely music, and to Spencer, our excellent technician. Thanks to the setup group, number 3. Those beautiful flowers, I just love them every Sunday, and everything else you've been doing for setting us up today. And to all for participating in today's service here at Lewis Hall and online. So now we will continue with VIUF events announcements. If anybody has an announcement related to the Unitarian Fellowship, please come forward and tell us about it.